Good evening. It's 6:30 on August the 20th here in Austin, Texas, and I am James Exum. My yoga name is Sakshi, which means the witness. First, I would like to apologize for the last video that I published. It was not supposed to end so abruptly, I assure you. I believe, well, I know what happened. I'm not going to make any excuses. No need to do that. What happened there was I did not realize that I was on a timer and that timer was going to run out. I believe the reason behind the timer coming into play during the making of the video was because there was not enough storage left on my Android phone. I'm new to this phone. I've bought it earlier this year right around Christmas or New Year, somewhere in there. So I'm new to it and I'm learning still about it. I had a flip phone for probably 15 years and a very simple little thing. And so I'm in a new world here with an Android phone. But I'm learning. I'm also learning to make videos. This will be my 21st video. My 20th video is the one I'm discussing and apologizing for because it was cut short. The intro to that video mentioned that that would be the last video in this series on the Bhagavad Gita and the 18 chapters thereof. Unfortunately, it didn't work out that way. So what I did was I went ahead and deleted that video from YouTube, my studio on YouTube, and I replaced it with one that I edited. I'm not very good at editing, as you will see, but I tried my best, and I cut it back to about around 30 minutes. Originally, it was about 50 minutes and should have run almost to an hour. Well, that's too long anyway, and that was not my original intention. But all of that is covered now, and again, I apologize for any inconvenience or any misunderstanding that video may have caused my viewers, my listeners. So I'm going to take up it. When I edited it became video number 15 and 16. It should have been 15, 16, 17, 18, and a conclusion, a summary conclusion. Didn't work out that way. So you will see how it is when you visit that video or view that video if you're so inclined. Again, my apologies. So I will start this video as number 21 with chapter 17. Also, there will be chapter 18 included in this video and a summary conclusion. So let us get started. Thank you for bearing with me during that. It wasn't an apology because I didn't mean to do it. It was an explanation. So here we go with chapter 17 of the Bhagavad Gita. And what this chapter explores is the nature of faith, devotion, and the intentions behind human actions through a reflective dialogue between Arjuna, who is the hero of the story, so to speak, and Lord Krishna, who is serving as his charioteer and teacher during this epic. This chapter categorizes faith and its expressions in three types: sattva, rajas, and tamas. If you saw my video on the gunas, you know what I'm talking about. If not, you're welcome to review that video. Each one of those represent different qualities and outcomes of devotion. The video emphasizes the importance of the spirit behind actions such as sacrifice, giving, speech, and even eating choices, illustrating how these reflect and these things illustrate how these reflect and shape one's inner nature and destiny. I'm sorry, these glasses and my lighting Plus, I'm in a post-operative situation with cataracts. Again, not an excuse, just facts. So let's continue. There are three types of faith. Faith manifested in three forms. Again, it's the gunas. The sattvic faith is clear, compassionate, and selfless. The rajasic faith is driven by passion and desire for rewards. The tamastic faith is confused, mechanical, and often misguided. These faiths shape our devotion. They truly do. And the quality of the mixture determines the quality of the devotion. Those leaning towards the sattvic, which is wisdom, represents wisdom. Raja represents action, and tamas represents the dark side of your choices and your actions. The quality of faith influences new rituals and sacrifices, how rituals and sacrifices are performed, ranging from pure and voluntary in sattva to self-interest in raja and carelessness in the tamas, sattva. Intentions in giving. Gifts reflect the giver's intent. Well, they should, and you will see how. Sattva gifts are spontaneous and unconditional. Rajasic gifts are given with expectations. I'm doing something for you, do something for me. It's sort of a careless form of karma. And the Raja gift giving may be harmful or begrudging because there's a motive behind them, and sometimes motives bring out negative karma. Now we're going to move from that to the power of words and rituals. Words carry the vibration of intention, such as sacred utterances like Om or Aham Atman, which is one of my ritualistic phrases I use. Aham Atman, I am Atman, I am the soul. And again, they can be a blend of sattvic, rajasic, or tamas in their good, bad, or evil effects. Now we're going to move on to food. Food reflects your inner nature. Your dietary choices symbolize spiritual qualities. Sattvic foods nourish and uplift. Rajasic foods stimulate, and tamastic foods dull and depressive. Well, that means there's probably a lot of sugar in those, like the junk food. You get a high from the sugar, and then you get the low, and then you get, I think the common phrase is called hangries, the hunger and angries combined. You see that in a lot of these body cam videos on the YouTube where the traffic stops and people reacting in very negative and childish ways. Now we're going to move on to fateful influences and destiny. The nature of one's faith in action shapes personal and collective destinies without condemnation, inviting awareness and the habit of intentional living, paying attention, doing it right. The dharmic, karmic path, the path of righteousness mixed with positive actions, positive karmic results. We'll follow that up by faith as a dynamic journey. Faith evolves through joy, doubt, and sorrow, encouraging mindful actions, truthful words, and generous gifts as part of its lifelong practice. I cannot agree with that any more than what I wrote here. And then you have, finally, the invitation to self-reflection. This chapter serves as a mirror, prompting individuals to examine their faith, intentions, and everyday choices with compassion and presence. And there endeth the lesson on chapter 17, or at least my take on it. Now, if you go back to Adi Shankara, who is the great commentator on the Gita, he will give you a contemporaneous report on it, commentary on it, from his date and time in history. I'm a little more modern, and I speak the modern English with a modern thought pattern. Well, as modern as I can be for almost 3/4 of a century, having been on this earth almost 3/4 of a century. Now we'll move to chapter 18, and we're doing really good on time here, it seems. So chapter 18, I was reading most of that last one because it was so detailed and involved, and this one I will paraphrase. Again, I'm working from my own writing, which I produced this. Well, I revised it today and printed it out, but I produced it in the last couple of weeks. So the reflections on chapter 18 of the Gita explores the distinction between renunciation and renouncement of action, emphasizing surrendering attachment to outcomes rather than mere inaction. Now that's paradoxical. I'll just let you rewind and listen to that a couple of times. Perhaps you can solve that paradox yourself. If not, I'll come back to it at the end of reading this paper. This concept of renunciation, well, I'm going into it now, so you may wait on that rewinding. The concept of renunciation, so central to many spiritual traditions, becomes a living dialogue in the exchange between Arjuna and Krishna, where Arjuna seeks to distinguish between renunciation and the renouncement of action. Krishna offers a nuanced understanding. Genuine renunciation is not a withdrawal from participation in the world, but rather a release from the personal claim on the outcome of one's deeds. You're not supposed to think in terms of reward when you do something. You're simply supposed to do your duty, and do it without thought of reward. It is not action that binds, but the attachment of results. In other words, if you're looking for a reward after you do something, then you didn't do it with a pure heart. You did it for the result. And you're attached to that result, and if that result does not come to fruition, then you may blame the person that you did the good deed or the action towards. It is not action itself that binds, but the attachment to the results, whether in the hope of pleasure or in the fear of pain. Therefore, the highest renunciation is not inactivity, but dynamic engagement. Very important word, dynamic engagement, as opposed to static. And this dynamic engagement should be a part of your life. It's performed with equanimity and free from the knots of desires and personal gain. I wrote a version, but that didn't quite fit. You'll notice that I correct my speech as I go along, and that's an old writer's fallacy. When I write, I'm constantly revising. Even as I'm typing, I'll stop and look at it, then I'll revise it. And then I'll do a full revision at the end of the paper or chapter or whatever I'm writing at that moment. So this is what I do with my speech. Sometimes you will hear me, I'm not being senile or I'm not going off track. I'm just simply correcting myself as I speak for your benefit and for my personal satisfaction. Krishna further illuminates the threefold nature of both action and renunciation by mapping them onto the three fundamental qualities. Again, the gunas come into play. We've spoken enough about the gunas. I'm not going to go there. You can see, you can do a comparative analysis in your own mind of how it was with food, how it was with faith, and now it's being presented, Krishna's presenting it for the blend to affect or damage action and renunciation in its purity. True renunciation, Krishna asserts, is characterized by the sattvic disposition. Well, I will stop there. In other words, the sattvic is a positive. The rajic is the action. The tamasic is the negativity, the negative aspects of almost anything. So we'll go from there to the next. This wisdom is grounded in the recognition of Dharma. Well, I just mentioned Dharma. Dharma and karma are the cousins. I named them the cousins in one of my earlier videos, and they are cousins. You hardly will see one without the other, and they are even closely spelled, Dharma, karma. Each individual is called to discern and fulfill their unique Dharma. I mentioned in my last video the word discern is very important, discernment. And fulfill their unique Dharma. One's natural work or calling is your Dharma, according to their inherent tendencies, family, and social context. Well, I can even go further than that and say personal context. Krishna's guidance is clear. It is better to embrace and even imperfectly fulfill one's own destiny than to pursue another's path. Stay true to your path. Follow your bliss, as Joseph Campbell used to say. Such authenticity is the seed of true progress, for it is infused with self-honesty and integrity, and those are some of the hallmarks of yogahood, of being a good yogi, being a good aspirant to yogic philosophy, being a good follower of the tenets of yoga. Engagement with worldly responsibility is not renounced, but reimagined. You don't really renounce things, you just reimagine it and lean towards the positive aspects of it. Anchored in detachment, where the heart remains unshaken by success or failure. I often do a quote. I say when I play games with friends that live here with me in my semi-retirement home, you have to be 55 to live here or older. Or when I play my computer avatar on my chess game on the computer. If I win, I win. If I lose, I look at the computer and I know it doesn't hear me, but I say to my opponent, it's the avatar on the computer, I say, well, you won that one. And I smile and I go on. This is how life should be. You should smile and go on, come good or bad. And you say, well, how is that possible? Well, that's part of the powers of yoga, the positiveness of a lifestyle of true yogic activity. Engagement with worldly responsibility is not renounced but reimagined, anchored in detachment where the heart remains unshaken by success or failure. On the path to liberation, Krishna teaches us in this 18th chapter that true freedom is founded by surrendering all actions to the Divine One, to Brahman, to let go of pride, possessiveness, and the restless hunger of desire. In this surrender, the seeker places unwavering trust in Krishna as both guide and refuge. There's a very old Italian saying, and it says, Signor, and forgive my pronunciation, I'm obviously English is my first language, and I barely speak it, but but still better than most. The Italian phrase is, Signor, tu es mi guido et mi succor. You are my guide and my place of refuge. And that's basically, obviously, was borrowed, not stolen, but borrowed from the sayings from the Gita. There are a lot of people, when they get into comparative religions or comparative religious philosophies or religious history, they'll say, oh, I know where they got that idea. They stole that from such and such, which preceded it. I always like to say, now I did that even myself. When I was young, I will admit I had those type of thoughts. But those thoughts were not right. Each culture evolves in its own time, in its own pace. So therefore, the idea of you reap what you sow, that can come from any agricultural society. The Bible, the Hebrew Bible, uses that phrase, and in the modern day English, American English, we say, what goes around comes around. Well, that's just a variation on it. That's a variation. So who stole from whom, or who borrowed and didn't mention it, that's okay too. Borrowing is okay, but you should mention the source. I tried to in all my papers. I tried to do sources and references to give credit where credit is due. So the seeker places unwavering trust in Krishna as both guide and refuge, and by doing so discovers a peace of mind that transcends all circumstances. The embrace of detachment, humility, and faith does not render one passive, but opens the way to life to be lived with grace and clarity, navigating your way through the complexities of life with a spirit of inner freedom and luminous guidance. It highlights the nature of duty, knowledge, and action within the cosmic order, and concludes, as this paper concludes, and as this video is about to conclude, or conclude the lesson, with an invitation to engage in life with detachment and trust in your God, in your Creator, in Brahman. And there it is. That's what I was going to say, or variations on that, in the last video that got cut off short. Again, you have my sincere apologies, but it was my ignorance, which is the cause of a lot of problems in this world. Ignorance causes a lot of problems, not just money, but ignorance. And what's even worse than ignorance is the steadfastness by which a lot of people stand by their ignorance. You tell them you don't know something, they'll argue you to the ground. Well, no, I don't know it, but you don't know a lot of things either. They're totally missing the point. These guys will never become presidents of their debate clubs. I don't believe they shall. So I will close now. Again, this has been a very long road. It was supposed to be 4 or 5 videos. It turned out to be 7, but so be it. Que sera, sera. So I hope you get to see each one of them, because each one of them gives a valuable lesson. But remember, these were just summary reflections on each one of those chapters in the great book, the Gita, the Bhagavad Gita. What comes next is a series of probably 6 videos, which will cover 6 or 7, maybe 8, but I'm going to shoot for 6 videos that will cover 3 chapters of the Gita once again, each, and then a conclusion, and of course at the beginning an introduction. But the reason I'm doing that as opposed to this little summary set of videos is because it's so rich in knowledge and detail. I want to share my narratives, my narrative commentaries on that richness and those details with you. So I thank you for that. I thank you for coming forward with me and maybe going into those also, because the philosophy of yoga is not a high school class. It's not even an undergraduate class. This is philosophy on the science of life at one of the highest levels of teaching and understanding there is. I'm not saying it competes with theoretical physics. I'm not saying, even though a lot of theoretical physics comes or is borrowed from yoga philosophy. Einstein borrowed, Newton borrowed, John Wheeler, the man that spoke of black holes, Robert Oppenheimer, the Manhattan Project, was very much into yoga and the philosophy of yoga. So scientists, Sir Isaac Newton, scientists for a long time have ventured over literary giants such as Emerson, Poe, in modern times, Carl Jung, Dr. Carl Jung, the psychologist. Yoga is not isolated just to those that sit around with their legs crossed looking at their belly buttons. That's the physical aspect of yoga. We're talking the intellectual level of yoga here, the study that has taken me almost 50, right at 50 years, to still not have mastered as an old yogi, but to have become very acquainted with. I'm very much immersed in it. So I've spent 25 minutes with you. Now I'm going to give you my closing that I use as a habit. And here it is. Be good to yourself. Be good to others. And pass those two phrases on to friends, family, and even strangers. And remember, the reason we want to do this, because it should make an effect over time, and someday in the future, the near future, I hope, maybe 5, 10, 15, who knows, 20 years now, we could all wake up to a revised world. And we can look at each other and say, isn't it wonderful? Now we know how to address each other and act toward each other and get along in the proper way. Thank you again, and good evening to you.